Okay, so how are you doing?
الحمد لله والشكر عظم الله أجوركم وأجورنا بمصاب أبي عبد الله الحسين and that أهل البيت عليهم السلام, praying that everybody is doing well inshallah.
To you too, the same. And thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the culture of commemoration of Muharram in Iraq. The Arbaeen walk was definitely one that I think I've done it a few times, but you know, every time you watch it, you want to go back again and again. And inshallah, I don't know when that'll happen, but it's
especially this year, we don't know what's happening there, and these days has been very confusing because you hear the warm welcome of the governor of Karbala, bless him, but it caused a lot of confusion in terms of, is this allowed? He was just welcoming, telling people, we welcome you if you do come. However, I'm hearing different reports from people from England and here, and even from my friends in Karbala who work in the ziyarah business, who themselves say we have not yet been given government approval. So everything's up in the air until we hear. So to begin, inshallah, today, first of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet and his holy progeny. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm honored when Auntie contacted me to talk about this, as I'm very passionate about the Husseini culture in general, as you all know, and through the mental health work that I do, I always like to connect it to spirituality. And this is a close thing to my heart when we connect the majlis and the spirituality of the majlis to our well-being and our mental health. I know you joined me in this this short clip that the Ahl al-Bayt TV did that was so dear to my heart, to be able to go back after 13 years and to experience the culture after not being there for so long was incredible. And to see my family who live in Karbala, where, I don't know if you know this, but my mother and my family, they grew up living in a house across from Al-Abbas alayhi salam. So I come from a culture where it's very much indebted in me and embedded rather. And I grew up with that, living in the West and hearing stories and asking and learning about the culture of living in the West. So my experiences that I'll be sharing with you today are from a Karbala'i originally, born in the USA and grown up here and in some parts of the Middle East, but I never actually grew up in Iraq. I got the opportunity in the year 2000 to go for the first time, which was almost like an exchange in a way, like a university exchange trip that changed my whole life in terms of understanding what culture is. Because when you live it here and you experience it here, it is vastly different than when you go in person. When we take a look at culture, culture is essentially all of a person's normal behavior within their own society. So what does it include? It includes language, right? Includes language, traditions, the way we dress. So in honor of our gathering today, I was very happy and proud to wear my abaya that I got actually from my first ziyarah. I love wearing it, and I wear it as a symbol of my love. I know people can look at it as oppressive or overdone, but it's how you wear it. And I love it with I wear it with love and pride. And so this is part of what we wear in Iraq traditionally, especially in Karbala and Najaf and in the holy places, but you will see other places would wear different clothing depending on where you are. Another big part of our culture is, of course, food. Now, I know today is chai and chat, but believe it or not, I actually whipped up some qeema and I put it in a mug, in my Abbas mug. So I'm actually going to go through this with you because I know a lot of us miss this year, this traditional meat and chickpea dish that we give out during Muharram. And also, when we look at culture, it's the things that make us think, the things that make us laugh or cry, right? Most of the time, we don't even think about it because it's all we've ever known. So this is, you could say, a psychological description of what culture is. So let's jump into some of these things. So and I want to make this interactive, please, not just me chatting up. So you, Auntie, and our lovely guests who had joined us, as soon as we put this out, mashallah, so many people asked to join this gathering. So this walk, I just see a question here. This walk wasn't last year. This was actually in 2017. And this year, we don't know yet if it's safe to go. I know some people in the UK have actually said that they've gotten some visas for their groups. I'm not too sure about that in terms of how valid it is, given, like I said, my own contacts in Iraq have said that the government has not yet given approval, but there's been a lot of pressure put on the government to change that. So we'll see. I know we can be very passionate about wanting to go to the ziyarah. Number one, right here, this time every year at this time, I've got my tickets, my hotel, where I'm staying, where I'm going, which group I'm going to go attend, the julus, all set. This year, nothing. I made my own qeema here. But we have to also think logically here. If there is a risk to go, this is different than going when ISIS was attacking. This is a different type of bala that is happening right now. And yes, I know we have faith, and I know, you know, Shifa al-Hussein, absolutely, we believe in that, but there's also logic, and the Imams and the Ahl Bayt also taught us logic. And even the Marja'iyya are banning it. They're saying don't. So for the safety of the virus from actually catching and going elsewhere, you know, we have to be careful. So everyone's gonna have to practice discretion in this case, like their own discretion. So when it comes to culture and during Muharram, there's so much around that, and we see the beautiful cultures. Whether I got the opportunity last year to actually come to the JCC, and I experienced almost all of Muharram there, and it was such a huge impactful experience upon me, given the opportunities that I've had to go in different parts of the world to see how it's done. But seeing it from the beautiful Khoja community, first and foremost, I have to commend how organized it is. MashaAllah, how organized it is. The volunteers, excuse me, even the shoes. There are labels on the shelves where you put your shoes, so when you go out, you know exactly where they are. Things like that. I love how green it is. And this is a practice that we're trying to get more into our general Muslim culture in terms of being aware of being green, because those of you who've been on ziyarah, you see the waste of the plastic and the food and all of that, and it just doesn't make sense, especially with water when you think about it. The whole point, part of the story, is the deprivation of the water, that the Imam and the Ahl Bayt were deprived of water and they were martyred without, thirsty basically. And so there's no reverence for that water and respect that you see. So there's a lot going on in terms of changing that, inshallah. And there's a groups called the Green Pilgrim. And I wouldn't call this Iraqi culture. I would call this our youth generation of culture of awareness that have learned from our elders who've implemented the green to continue that. Inshallah, we can continue that culture and embed it in the Iraqi culture to be more aware of that. So when it comes again to the different cultures, Iraqis are really big on their traditions. And sometimes, forget Husseini tradition, Muharram, just any traditions in general. For example, the abaya, right? It's a big deal if you don't wear it in Karbala. I recall the very first year I went down there, I just wore not the abaya tras, the over the head one like that, just a regular abaya, because as soon as I tried to put this on, my cousins and family started making fun of me. They said, you just can't rock that. You can't walk out with that, because it kept slipping and falling. Little did I know that there are some of them that actually have elastics, and the Iraqis don't have that. So they know this is a Lebanese or Iranian abaya, but the newer ones are putting that because they can fall off, right? In any case, so definitely in terms of the clothing, you see that the men, they wear the traditional beautiful dishdashas. I absolutely love the traditional clothing that we have. And like I said, some people could potentially see this as oppressive. Depends how you look at it, your worldview. If you see this as a symbol of what the ladies of Ahl Bayt wore in terms of coverage, and you want to follow and you honor them, when you put it on, there's such a beautiful feeling that you are trying to follow in their footsteps. I personally find that. So when I do wear the black and the abaya, I'm just overwhelmed with, this is a symbol for me. So there, of course, it's their everyday wear. And I learned from my cousins, seeing how they dress, they actually wear shirts and t-shirts and jeans under the abaya, and this is just over. And they don't even wear the sleeves like we do or anything like that, or even sometimes don't even wear an actual hijab under, but they know how to wear the abaya to the point where everything is covered. I can't even imagine my lifetime managing that, mashallah. Even with this, I'm still tripping and slipping. And I only have ever worn this abaya in Iraq when I went during Sha'baniya, which was still an intense season. But the rest of the week, I was able to wear it. Arbaeen, forget it. I'm wearing that just one piece abaya that we all wear, like the dress, and a hijab on top and another layer. But this is near impossible because it gets pulled and yanked, and you really have to be a master of that. As I was saying, my first time I ever went, when I attempted this, I was made fun of. So I just kept that long, the dress looking abaya. And interestingly enough, when it comes to the culture there, and it was during Arbaeen when I went the first time, They did not have the zuwars that we have today, as you saw in the video at the beginning there. So it was an extremely different culture there at the time, where I was immediately known as an outsider, as a foreigner, even though my family is from Karbala. We did not have the zuwars that we have today. If somebody comes from outside of the city, they know they are foreigners. Now it's mixed, but they still know the locals. The locals still know the locals when somebody comes in and talks to them, even if they're Iraqi. And interestingly enough, within a day and a half, one of my Canadian friends who was living there at the time, and she had gotten married, when we called each other finally, she said, yeah, I heard you were here. And how did you know? Did your mom tell you from Canada? She goes, no, we heard about the girl in the one-piece abaya that was walking around downtown Karbala. I was shocked, but I mean, that's the normal part of culture in terms of gossip, perhaps, in terms of what they know, somebody who's not local. But I just found that quite amusing that right away I was known as that foreigner kind of thing. It just word got around. Alhamdulillah wa shukr. So clothing, we definitely can say, is a huge part of the Muharram culture. And if you notice in general here in Canada, we also have that culture where we are changing the clothing. We will wear black. Now, if you notice in different cultures, people will wear black during the first 10 days, perhaps. But perhaps you'll see in Lebanese culture, some people will not wear full black. They will wear black with a hijab that has some patterns on it. Right? You will find also, I also know in the Southeast Asian culture, I've seen that ladies will wear the shalwar kameez, for example, but it won't be solid black. It will be black and white, or perhaps something like that. I've noticed that. In the Iraqi tradition, people will wear solid black. Now, the hardcore people, you could say, from Karbala, Najaf, and other parts of the country will wear solid black for 2 months. Why? I tell you why. It is because you go up to Arbaeen and then another 10 to 20 days, because there are other shahadas there. The shahadat, or the passing of the Prophet during that time, and Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. So people will pull it a full 2 months until Rabi' al-Awwal, and then the different celebrations will begin around that time. So during this time, in terms of culture, it's a solid black. I have to say, I'm one of those people who've been practicing that the last few years, and I look forward to wearing the black. People could say, well, it's such a depressing color. It's so heavy. It's it can trigger grieving and depression and mourning. Sure, if you look at it that way. However, I'm always talking about reframing, right? If you reframe this as the color of grief, of who you are mourning and what they stood for, this is a statement for yourself. This is an empowerment for yourself. This is, maybe I'm taking a little bit too far when I say, but an outward form of ibadah by showing the love for the Ahlul Bayt. These are my words. I'm not bringing them from anybody else. This is how I view it. So, and how I viewed the culture, the Iraqi culture, when wearing that black, every day it's a constant reminder. I remember for years before I went on to Ziyara, I got this beautiful bracelet from the Toronto area, from Al-Huda. And it's from this store, the IslamicStore.com. They were selling them at Al-Huda, and I bought a whole bunch of them and gave them to friends. And this I wore constantly on my hand for years before I went to Ziyara. And I had all these bangles and stuff that I had, like the colors. And then this I got from my Ziyara till now. I still wear it. I have to wash it because it gets dirty sometimes. You just get so connected to things that are important to you when you buy over there. This ring as well. This ring when I wore on the Arbaeen. So these are not necessarily culture. These become your personal culture, right? In terms of how you want to show that. And this, I would definitely wear these. Even to work, I will wear the solid black. But of course, I will kind of play it up a little bit. In Iraqi culture, especially if you're a Sayyid, and I know in some other cultures as well, you will wear the green. So of course I got from my Ziyara. You'll wear the green. Now, what is the meaning for this? Perhaps people are exhibiting the love for the Ahlul Bayt because we know this is the color represented by the Ahlul Bayt. In Iraqi culture, they will call you right away a Sayyid or Alwiya, a Sayyida. If you wear this, you are symbolizing yourself as a Sayyid. So then I would get mocked by my family, including my mother here. You're not an Alwiya, take it off. They're very big on that culture in Iraqi culture. If you wear this, that means you're a Sayyid. So be careful, because then, they'll call you right away Sayyid or Sayyida. Part of the clothing of the culture when it comes to Muharram, you will find reciters who will wear these a lot. The men, especially, if you notice, they will wear these. these scarves that are folded and the different beautiful designs and whatnot. And some even have the words Ya Hussein written on them, and they come in green for Sayyid, of course, and then you've got this black. Sometimes they come in light colors that you can wear during mawalids and mawluds, right? So this is definitely something I wear during my Muharram times. I would wear these colors kind of to break it off during the work here. I'll wear a light green scarf as well. And yes, I'm not a alwiya, but that's okay for me. I find when you're wearing the full black, it can be intimidating at work. But you can also train the culture at work. Because I've been working 12, 13 years in the same place now, when I wear the black, my colleagues say, oh, it's that time of morning again of the year that you do. And so we can train and teach and show our colleagues and the love of Imam Hussein in so many different ways. This is, again, not specifically Iraqi culture, that this is a culture that I've adapted into my work culture, where they know that. They know as soon as the first night comes, I'm going to take off the 10th day kind of thing. They know, not going to happen this year, but they know that 40 days after, I'm out of here for about a week or two in Iraq, right? So it's fascinating how sometimes our clothing can be a huge symbol. And like we said, the men wear the full dishdasha, which is the traditional clothing in Iraq, and they would wear the agal on the head, so the black around the head with the scarf that can be in different colors. Mostly it's white and black. You see that in other Gulf countries as well. In Iraq, it's very symbolic, very known to be Iraqi, with the black or the white, depending on what season it is. In Muharram, of course, the black. And then it's also very tribal. Now, if you recall in the video, there were a lot of traditions around food, right? A lot of traditions around food and drink. And if you noticed what I call the coffee man, and he's one of my favorite personalities that I met on the ziyarah. And I have to say, when I went on the ziyarah, I was very lucky to walk alongside Brother Ayaz Ali. If you recognize his book, that he came out with this book, and in it has a variety of pictures from the trip. And I have to say, I have to brag and I have to show off and say I was with him when he took these pictures, some of them, especially this one here, because I took almost the exact replica of some of the pictures, because I was taking photos with him with his cameras, but also, of course, on my phone, alhamdulillah, which this phone has recorded what you saw in the documentary there. So one of the pictures I wanted to show you in terms of tradition when it comes to Iraq and food and culture is this gentleman here, whom I call the coffee man. If you remember him from the video, I actually interviewed him and spoke with him, and I told him where I was from. I was from Canada, and I don't think he actually believed that I was from Canada until I spoke English. And if those of you who are Arabic speaking in the video, you'll notice he said, Ahlan wa sahlan ba'ahali Canada. So welcome to those people of Canada. And we had a good chat with him, and and if you notice in the video, when I made a comment, this was not your standard Starbucks. You can definitely see here how they go about doing traditional Iraqi coffee. And you saw how it was done in the video. And so they would use, the della, which is something like that. And if you notice, they had a variety of different sizes, and it goes from the biggest pot down to the smallest. And it just keeps boiling and boiling, and they pour it one to the next until it's finally poured into one of these. This is not exactly the style that they use. The ones that they use are more rounded from the bottom, if you recall. And then so they use that. I recall before we went on the walk, we were advised, do not drink any of this. Do not drink it. Because what they do, I don't know if you saw in the video, but they actually had a bowl with water that they would dip in to rinse and take out, and then dip in again and rinse. So it's not very sanitary. However, these gentlemen offered coffee. I declined, which is kind of rude in the Iraqi culture, but I didn't want to take any chances. And you see here how it's poured. And my brother Ayaz, he actually took the coffee and drank it. And I had a little clip of him doing that. And I'm like, oh, I hope you don't get sick after. Alhamdulillah, he didn't. But you see here, traditionally, coffee is a very big part of the Husseini culture and Muharram, Iraqi culture in general, that is also offered during funerals. So when funerals are held and people come to the home, men specifically, when you come and you give your taziyah, your condolences to the family, then coffee is given around. Right? It's passed around as a form of respect. So you drink some of it. And then when you drink it, and there's a way, and I've learned this over the years, again, interacting back and forth, is when they go like this, shaking at the coffee mug like this, the little istikan, means they want more or they're finished. There's so many different etiquettes. I can't remember at the top of my head right now. However, some of them include, in terms of signaling, symbolizing or signaling that you're leaving or whatnot. Sometimes it can be really rude to do certain things, but people like us are forgiven, given that we haven't immersed ourselves in the culture, we've grown up here. So this is a big deal. Another big part of Iraqi culture when it comes to food during Muharram, of course, is the chai. The chai. And I'm sure all of you have seen lots of different sizes of the pots along the Arbaeen walk inside of Karbala and Najaf. And chai, as we know, just like in our cultures, it's very important. The joke with Iraqi chai, of course, is that it's sugar and then a bit of chai. You're not drinking chai and a little bit of sugar. It's sugar and then the chai. It's very, very sweet, and it's very heavy as well. I like it a little bit light. But there's something about that. If you look here at how big that sugar pot is, right there. It's a big thing for them. That's why a lot of them have diabetes, right? So the chai is also very symbolic, that they give out at the majalis during Muharram before the mullah or the reciter begins, right? They will come around and give some of the chai, and it's made with hel, cardamom. So that's the usual flavor that if you notice in Iraqi chai, specifically, they will use cardamom in there, which is included in the cooking as well. It's very much part of the culture. And so this is given right before the majlis starts. It's considered rude or disrespectful once the mullah recites that you are still sipping on your tea. So you would finish that. There's also a biscuit that is given out during Muharram, and you've seen this in Iraq. It's called kak, which is a dry biscuit that can be long or almost like an oval shape, and that you dip it in the chai and you eat that. And they give that kak al-Abbas. They will present that during Muharram. It's pretty much part of the culture at all times. People can just have breakfast with that. You know how some cultures just have their little coffee in the morning and then we'll have a brunch or more of a bigger breakfast later. This is standard as well in Iraqi culture. Another standard when it comes to food during the different days is symbolic, of course. So one of the big ones we have is on the night of the Abbas alayhi salam, we give out khubz al-Abbas. There's different variations of this. It actually literally means bread of al-Abbas. There's different ways of doing it. So you'll have just your regular pita bread, or in Iraq, you have the bread from the tannoor. Remember the tannoors? Yes. So I forgot what it's called, but the stove that is made from the fire or stone. So you make the bread, they slap the bread inside and then they take it out. So they would use that. Here we use the pita bread, but now there's lots of actual Iraqi bakers here where you can access this type of bread. And so they would put a type of cheese in there, some kind of cheese, and lots of green. So mint, parsley and whatnot in there, sometimes even green onions, and then they wrap them up and then they pass them out to the people as Laylat al-Abbas. They'll pass it out right after the majlis for them. Another form of khubz al-Abbas is the khubz laham that we have in Iraq, which is not like a meat pie that we know from the Lebanese culture, but similar ingredients in the sense that it's a bread where meat is ground into the dough, and it's cooked with a lot of what's it called, turmeric, which is why it looks kind of yellow, and it has parsley in there. And so the meat is cooked and baked along with the bread. This is also something that is given out during Muharram, khubz al-Abbas, which is nutritious, filling, and in honor of al-Abbas. We also know, for example, this is not food, but we know, for example, the night of Al-Qasim, the son of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, there's a lot of traditional beauty that we see in all the different cultures as the groom that never got married. And so you will see tons of displays, and you see this in Muharram. You saw it, I'm sure, this year, those of you who are watching the Karbala lives from Iraq, that you have Siniyat al-Qasim, which literally again means the tray of al-Qasim. So in there people put sweets and henna, representing symbolically the wedding that he never had, flowers and whatnot. And people do nidr every year in the name of al-Qasim, and then give this out. And it's very popular, which we've missed out this year, of course, in the masjids, where people will prepare this and then hand them out after they finish the maqtal of al-Qasim. And it's very beautifully symbolic, symbolizing the youth that did not marry, but rather the henna he received was the blood He became henna'd in his blood rather than the actual henna. So it is very sad, but very symbolic at the same time. And the sweets that people create and give out, it could be simple chocolates and whatnot. I usually have my annual trade that I do, which I did at home this year. I love bringing in fresh red roses, which I find are exquisitely romantic, but also they have a tragic sense to them. And I have a beautiful mini dariyah that I put in the middle with a green and black, and my typical Ferrero Rocher chocolates, and the golden what do you call them, the Werther's Originals, and chocolates that I would put, and then we'd hand them out to people. Children also become very excited when they see this. And this is a perfect learning opportunity to get children involved as part of that. In Iraq, they would create little packs. Sometimes they are very extravagant to the point where each of these packs, you will have the names of the Ahl al-Bayt on them. They're almost like favor bags. Exactly like favor bags. You know what I'm talking about. And they have Benin written on them. They have the name of Al-Qasim, Al-Abbas, Al-Hussein, Sayyidah Zainab. You can buy them from Iraq. And then so people would put sweets in them, or they'll hand make them, little packets of henna, and put them again in those favor bags and hand out. I'm sure those of you who've attended Iraqi majalis have seen this beautiful candles, of course. And so people would just beg to get the murad, just please give me some of your thawab, and inshallah next year when I get mine I will do a slini again. So this is a beautiful Iraqi tradition that I know many cultures also do in so many different ways. Now when we come to the night of the 10th, so the 9th night of Muharram, we also have the tradition in terms of, and I know similar cultures also do this, in terms of giving out the yogurt drink or milk in honor of the baby that did not receive any water and milk, Abdullah Radi'. So people will give out milk in honor of that to the attendees at the majlis, or even you will find lots of liban, as it's called, the yogurt drink that is given out during Muharram, and even on the walk you find that, and even in Karbala and Najaf when you're there. So a lot of these beautiful traditions, sometimes I asked my mom, and even earlier today, I asked her when I was just making sure that I got all the ingredients right for this. And by the way, I'm going to share how I did this with you. I'm going to share because it's so easy. It is so easy. Every one of you tonight, inshallah, can make some, or tomorrow for your families. I did it in less than half an hour. Less than half an hour. So when I was asking about the meaning behind this, the qeema, as well as those of you who've heard harissa. So harissa is using barley or whole grains, I believe. Correct me, my Iraqi friends who are here. And what you do is you have chicken broth or sometimes other meats that people use, and they spice them. So they use a lot of nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, and bay leaves, and 7 spices to cook the chicken in, or the meat, and then that's used in the harissa. We have that also in Southeast Asian culture and Khoja culture, halim, but it's made in different variety, different ways, and beautiful ways. The Iraqi tradition of making harissa, as we call it, is in such a way, and I'm sure you've seen the big pots of how they cook that, of course, right? And I'm going to quickly find a picture here for that. And what you see essentially there, again, a lot of people in terms of culture and families will actually come together. They know that this families, they're doing the ashur for the 10th cooking, or they're doing the tabakh, the cooking for Al-Abbas, or in Arbaeen, they're doing the Arbaeeniyah. My family also does this in Karbala, as alhamdulillah, they're khiddam, they're servers of the people that come, where they will cook in huge batches. And I'll show you here a picture, as you can see, these huge pots that you can see right there, and how the rice, and this is for the qeema, as you see, and how it is cooked with saffron and then passed out in the non-recyclable containers that you see. Inshallah, we're slowly working on initiatives to make sure that Karbala has recyclable products to give out to people. So these pots, people will give nidr and say that I'm going to donate the meat, I'm going to donate this, just like in our other cultures. Families will get together the night before and start cooking before Fajr. Because these big pots, although I did my little pot in less than in half an hour, this of course takes a lot of work in terms of prepping the meat, cutting the onions. And for those of you who use Instagram, what I highly recommend is go check out on my Instagram page full highlights of my first ziyarah trip and other trips as well, where I actually document the step-by-step cooking that we do in my family's home in Karbala, in terms of how they do the qeema and how it's done, and then how they then serve it and pass it out to the zawar. It is so beautiful because it's a family gathering in honor of Al-Hussein, and people all contribute to this, and they do it in the name of their loved ones as well, the marhumin, thawab for their marhumin. And my grandmother, God rest her soul, they've been doing it in her honor yearly now in my khala's house in Karbala, where we usually stay. Khala Azhar, I know you're not watching, but just a shout out. And it's so beautiful. And part of the traditions as well in terms of food, you find in the mornings they eat gamar. How many of you have seen or heard of gamar? No? Yes? Yeah? Yum. Yeah, I can hear.
Yes.
So gamar is a thick cream that is made from, yes, I can see people saying that. Yes. It's a thick cream made from buffalo milk, as far as I understand, and it's boiled over and over again into layers. And so they would bring that on occasions, usually for happy occasions, but it's also a form of respect that you show your guests when they come to your house to help you in the cooking. And I remember the past year when I've gone again and again, they would have that, and they would have different types of jams that they would put with that, including dibis, which is the date molasses that is also used with that, and fresh bread. Like I said, if you go to my highlights, you'll find all of these adventures, and you find I'm immersed in the culture, talking to people, asking questions, how they make things, the meaning behind it. There's no time to go over everything now because I know we have to wrap up soon. So you would have that along with other traditional foods, and in honor of your guests who were there, to help you with the cooking. And then, like I said, it's a beautiful gathering. You will have majalis, people who do majalis at home. They'll put latmiyat, and you hear it just like you saw in the videos. You hear them everywhere in the streets. And this is how it's done beautifully. So this is a huge part here. I have to taste it again.
I have a question, Sister Berak. So one of the traditions that I find that there's a lot of not acting. Yes. You be able to shed some light on that, like the characters dressed up and they come out. 2 years ago, I was in Karbala for Ashura, and then I've done a few Arbaeens, but Ashura I haven't. That was the only time I went. And we found even when you went to the Haram, they had the actors, and I don't know how to say it in a better way, but they do act out the scenes. And so could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely. So this has developed over the years as part of the majalis to revive the story. Now, you notice that year by year, they get even more intense with the acting, and the Zuljana, the horse, and the bridal or groom procession of Al-Qasim and Al-Abbas. Personally, I would say sometimes it could get out of hand in terms of representing, because they're so enamored, so passionate about the story. Sometimes they exaggerate. We've heard this on the Mambar as well, right?
Yes.
So this is what you see as well. I recall also when I was walking in the walk, and you saw it in the video, where you would stand. Different mawaqib would do that. So essentially what it is that they're reviving the story in a different way, and it can be very, you can get really drawn into the story when you see it played out in front of you. Absolutely.
True.
What was your impression of that when you saw it on TV?
So the first time I encountered this was during one of the Arbaeen walks, and this was the time when the kafila is coming back per se from Sham back to Karbala. Bibi Zainab and the Ahl al-Bayt are being brought back.
Yes.
It was very realistic in the sense that, the way they were dressed, the way they were, the soldiers on the horses, with
vivid.
It was like they looked really scary too, honestly.
Yes.
But I was the worst or the most poignant part of that was the treatment of Bibi Sakina, because they had a Bibi Sakina there with them, or Ruqayya. And that was it was very sad. I couldn't watch because it was really, really poignant. And then when I was there for Ashura, then I also saw some of this in the Haram.
Yes.
And
reenact the
but
story.
It wasn't very close by, so I didn't didn't pay too much attention. But it brings out a lot of emotions when they do that. And but again, like you said, it could be exaggerated. Maybe something simple would be okay, maybe, but I don't know. I'd feel. I see a hand up. I wonder if Mariam.
Yeah, one of the sisters here is saying it's a visual to bring out immense emotions hearing the story than seeing it, and I think it's a beautiful way of depicting it as well when you see it. And you notice young children, and I'm sure you've seen videos of this over the years captured, of young children who actually go and start hitting some of the soldiers in defense, and it's such a beautiful fitra to see how how emotional it is for them, how it really captures their emotions. They leave them alone, and this is almost a way of answering that call, هل من ناصر ينصرنا. And this is answering that call in a way. The thing is though, and I'm very skeptical, and I'm sure a lot of us are like this as well, it is one thing to display this during Muharram, leading up to, even sometimes people forget, after the 10th of Muharram, they're back to wearing normal colors, listening to music, engaging in parties, planning weddings, birthdays. And I'm not looking down on people like that, but come on, you would never do that if it was your mother or father who passed away, much less the grandson of the Prophet who was murdered in this way. I find it quite outlandish when people do that during this time, just as a form of disrespect to who we are mourning.
I agree. Absolutely.
And it is unheard of in Karbala and Najaf and these cultures in Iraq that anybody does any celebrations of weddings or engagements or birthdays during that time. You will not hear of that there, perhaps in this part of the world, but you will definitely not hear that. People plan to do their weddings before Muharram and Rabi' al-Awwal. Like amongst the first weddings are right after Rabi' al-Awwal.
I think I believe that we as Khojas, when we were growing up in East Africa, we were probably, we did the same things, and we were very, mindful of these things.
Exactly.
I don't know what changed once, the communities moved here. A lot of times you find maybe it's the faith that is being diluted by their surroundings and the environment and things. And so, what holding on sometimes feels like, but yes, there are some of us that do believe in those things. And, even the wearing of the black, I don't think I would change it because I've always grown up wearing black.
MashaAllah.
And I don't think I would.
Such a beauty, isn't there, Auntie? There's such a beauty of wearing that black in honor. We do that to our loved ones if they pass on. How could we not do that for just 2 months for the Imam? But it's really important that when it comes to this type of outward display of grief and spirituality and religiousness, it's so important that we're working on the inside as well. People forget that because it becomes almost like, if you look at it from, let's say, a Western lens in terms of the Arbaeen and Muharram, they call it a festival. A festival sounds like happiness and joy. But the outside lens, if people fixate just on rituals and don't understand the meaning behind it and understanding it's so much more than that, the message, you've lost the message. For example, if we take a look at how Latum is done, this is one of my favorite things I like to explain, especially to my revert friends, and when I take them to majalis, especially Iraqi majalis. They're pretty intense. I'm sure you've been entered an Iraqi majlis. And especially if you enter a majlis where it's very Najafi or very Karbala'i, because you notice in different subcultures of Iraq, the way Qeema is done, which I will talk about in a few minutes, is done different.
We're going to talk about it soon. We're going to end soon.
Oh, this is cool. Yeah, inshallah. But the Latum, let's talk about that in terms of Iraqi cultural Latum. So for those of you who've been watching, they've actually started Latum even before Muharram. I heard Latmiyas came out this year before Muharram, and they were in honor, you could say, of the Imam, despite the COVID and all these brave chants of this illness is not going to stop us, we're going to do our majalis. And you see the pandemic Muharram where they're like spaced apart and they've got their mask and they're doing Latum. Beautiful. There's so many different creative ways that we've been able to do it. So each of the nights, of course, there's a different Latmiya or a recitation according to the personalities that we are honoring, which is so beautiful. And you see, again, the depiction of these nights where if it's the Laylat al-Ashir, where you have the baby, the cradle, right? Al-Abbas, you have people come in dressed as him as well, Al-Qasim, the Sliniya, etc., etc. So these Latmiyas, traditionally the women would have their Latmiyas or their majalis rather before the main program. And in there you have a reciter, a mullah, as we call them in Iraqi tradition.
Yeah.
And there's a whole culture, and I know we have that in your culture too, around the mullah. In Iraq, this is her full-time job all year round. One of my closest friends, who I actually asked her to join us to recite for us, she's doing a majlis right now in London. She couldn't join us. But if you go on my social media, you see that I posted about her and how she talks about the majlis and the culture around that. So check her out, Alwiya Tuqa. So the ladies' majlis, you'll have the mullah, and she has a servant, Sanna'at al-mullah, as we call it in Iraq. And I grew up here looking at the majalis. Do you know how old I was when I saw my first majlis? Because I lived in predominantly Sunni Muslim countries. And when we came to Canada, I was in grade 4. I was 9, 10 years old, and I lived in Quebec. We didn't have any exposure to that. The only exposure I had to Muharram and my Shia culture was obviously from my parents listening to Dr. Sheikh Al-Wa'ili on a cassette tape for 10 days. And my mom would cook certain foods. And I'd say, when I grow up, I'm going to cook and give too. I remember that as a child. My first exposure to an actual majlis, an Iraqi, like very, very heated Iraqi Karbala Najafi one, was when I was 13 years old in Montreal. And when we went, my father heard that his friend is in Montreal from Iraq. He threw us in the car and we went for Muharram there. And the first exposure I got was my mom throwing now he's 30 something, but at the time a year old, threw my baby brother at me and jumped in. And I'm standing there in absolute shock, horrified at what these women are doing the Latum, like, not just the like this, but the Latum I'm sure you've seen when they do this, right? And I'm standing there acting normal. Meanwhile, inside, my 12, 13-year-old was terrified, holding my baby brother. Guess who jumped in the next day? I was in there the next day. Traditionally, before, they used to do the Latum for the hair, where they would, I'm sure you've seen that, where they would bend down, and they were almost symbolizing as though the women of Karbala in grief, how they were doing their majalis. This has actually now been slowed down and banned out slowly, as they're saying this is too much of the extreme stuff, perhaps, you know.
Hello.
They want to keep it down more to the actual keeping this rather than, but there's still some places Karbalais will still do the head latum tossing.
I'm sorry, but I
Please,
have
Mariam,
I'm
go
so
ahead.
sorry.
Sorry, Mariam.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I actually wanted to talk about the hair.
Yeah.
And here in Sweden, we still do it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
There's
some places that will do it, and some places they've slowed it down. Like I know here in Ottawa, they've stopped doing it in certain centers, and other centers they still. So it's a matter of how you choose to do it, really. But I know traditional Iraq, they still do it. There's specific latmiyas for specific types. So there's the fast one where they would kind of like go and two women would go back and forth, facing each other. It's called the jola. And so they would go like this, back and forth facing each other. When done correctly, it's a beautiful way of a ritual of sharing that grief. And so the crowd would be around, and then 2-4 people at the same time would go back and forth. What I've noticed growing up here in the mixed Iraqi culture that I'm in here, you have people from the south, you have people from Najaf, you have people from Baghdad, from Karbala. And when they come, they all bring their different ways of latam, and it just becomes a whole mess. I have to say, because they don't know, so to say, the inside rules for it. Like you can only do this at a time, and then you step out and make room for other people to jump in. Whereas you have people from the south, God bless them, from Al-Amara and Basra, they have a different way of doing it. And again, it's a beautiful symbol of how they express that. And it's a very traditional way where they go like this, and it's expressing from your heart, like aha, aha, like they say it like that, right? And so it's almost like a jumping on the spot. And so some women will jump in, like usually the elderly ladies will jump in and do that, right? So there's that one, but it's not synchronized, as somebody mentioned here. There's a lack of synchronicity in that. So that's what it can look like, everybody jumping in.
Okay. We're kind of running out of time, Sister Berak. You know, I know I could listen to you for a whole another hour, but I think we have to wrap up.
Finish up.
So
can we wrap up?
Can we get the recipe for your?
Absolutely. Let's do that. I just want to acknowledge a comment here. There's also a type of latam where women sit down, yes, and they sit around each other in a synchronized term where they would do the latam again on their face or their chest. I don't know what it's called, but again, there's specific latmiyas where you do a specific type of latam. This is for the women. I highly encourage all of us, inshallah, next year, the majalis will be physically open again. Go to each other's centers. Observe how it's done. I learned how to do the khoja latam last year. I loved it, where you hold on to each other and there's a unity in it, where you're holding on to each other's shoulders, right? And
Yes.
then as you do that, you step down and you do the latam 3 times and you repeat. It's beautiful. I absolutely loved it because there's a connection together. So absolutely. So just quickly before we get to the qeema here,
Yeah.
the tradition of the men latam.
Okay.
I'm absolutely enamored and absolutely adore since I was a child and exposed to this culture. Love the way the latam of the men, because it's very testosterone based, you could say, but it's slow. It's not as fast as how the women do that, right?
Yeah.
And so they have a very different way. They have fast ones as well. They have slow ones. And I just want to quickly go on that because this is Iraqi culture, and I promise you I'll do this. But you will see, for example, on the day of Ashura, there are different cultures that will do the tatbir, and we know there's different controversies around that. After that, you have Aza, which is the commemoration called Aza Tuwairij. And this is the people that come and run in the thousands, symbolizing Labbaika ya Hussain, Labbaika ya Hussain, where they're answering that call. It is absolutely skin prickling when you watch this on the morning of the 10th. For those of you who stay up to watch from here, how you hear them just running. And again, people obviously make preparations.
It always gives me goosebumps when I watch that, because it's like, my God, it's people answering that call of Imam Hussain, you know.
And running like that and running towards that.
You know.
And so there are different traditions you will see around the 10th that are from the tatbir that other people do to this, which I find is just so riveting and passionate, that we're answering the call, we're coming to your aid, because back then we didn't. It's shown on Imam Hussain TV and Karbala TV. So moving on a little bit further, people continue minimum 13 days of majalis. Why? People forget after the 10th day, Ashura is not over. Muharram and the message of Sayyidah Zainab starts the 9th, the 11th, that day, the day of Ashura, that night. Shami Ghariban, right? With the candles and the condolences for the atrocities and the trauma they had witnessed that day. And so in honor of that, we do the 13 days majalis minimum, right? And with that, they continue on weekly majalis. And you see this on TV. People will hold their gatherings in majalis, especially Iraqis. Every day, the mullahs, they've got somewhere to go for majlis, right? And they will continue that on. Now, the third day, this is important we'll just wrap up quickly some Iraqi culture here. When it comes to the defin of the Imam, the burial of the Imam, where you see the tribe of Bani Asad till today. And I'm sure you saw those a week ago. It is absolutely beautiful, because you know the story of Bani Asad. They did not fight with the Imam. They lived to regret it, but they came to bury. The women came to help bury, and then they called the men to come bury. And that's why you see the women with the baskets. You saw them on their heads and turab on their face, is because of that. The symbol of us coming to bury. And it's very, very earthly. It's very raw. When you see the same tribe from before, they still honor that today. Can you imagine being part of that tribe that came and buried the Imam? Allahu Akbar. It's very emotional, you know. Alhamdulillah wa shukr. It's inshallah, may Allah give us the health first and foremost this year, and the shifa, so that we can experience these beautiful, beautiful traditions. And I encourage, like I said, please go to each other's centers, the Pakistani, the Iranis, the Afghanis, the different Iraqis, the different Khojas as well, because there's so much beauty in expressing our love for the Imam in our mornings. And of course, when it comes to food, it is very important as well, is because when you give this thawab in the name of the Imam, the blessings that everybody, and you see everything you see in Muharram, in Ashura, in Arbaeen is free. People save their money all year round. And you've seen these pictures of people who are in the utmost of poverty, even if they can give out water, even if you can give out dates in the name of the Imam. They just want to serve the servants of the Imam, because we know there's so much blessings in that. And we know, and especially the research that I do, and when it comes to exploring the connection between spirituality and well-being, there is so much blessings and so much cleansing of the soul and uplifting in the majlis, in the barakah that we do, that helps you when you are depressed. And inshallah, my dear sisters and aunties, I would need your prayers for a project that I'm currently working on, that inshallah will be released in Arbaeen. And it's about the impact of the ziyarah on the mental health. It's a documentary that I recorded in my second ziyarah that has been in the works for the last while. Finally found the right people to do it. Inshallah, ya Rab, please pray, because especially this year, when most of us are not going to be able to go, we will want to watch things like that we haven't seen before.
Definitely.
To connect.
Definitely.
When it comes to Qeema, finally, in conclusion, because there is so much obviously more, and I see a request inshallah for future at your service inshallah. When it comes to Qeema, I'll tell you the recipe that I use today, which is a mix of what my mom taught me, and as a traditional Karbalaiya who lived across from the Imam, you're getting it right from the source. So what you want to use is, I like using beef. You can use beef, and the quick way to do it, which is how I did it in half an hour, is I actually pre-cook the meat with herbs and spices ahead of time. So you can use whatever spices you like, but traditionally, these are the spices: cardamom, cinnamon, nutmeg, dried ginger, black pepper, cumin, turmeric. We like using garam masala too,
Okay.
the meat spices, and salt, dried lemon. You know those dried lemon balls, but powdered.
Yeah.
So that's what you use in the meat. So I cook my meat and freeze it and then take out whenever I want to do a dish, I have that ready. So it's easier to do that. So you have your meat and broth ready. You need lots of onions. Okay.
Oh.
Slice your onions thin and long, not chopped, thin and long, as my mom told me.
Yeah.
Saute them with all of those spices that I mentioned. Add in your meat and let them stew and cook together. The meat's already cooked at this point, so it's just the flavors. Then I always I look for shortcuts in my cooking because I don't have time to make a full brand new meal from scratch. I take our traditional food and I always find shortcuts, which is why I'm a big lover of food and enjoy it. So I always find shortcuts. Shortcut here is just get a can of hummus, of chickpeas.
Yes.
Not hummus, the paste. No, chickpeas. The word hummus just means chickpeas in our language. Wash it and drain it. Some people will get the ones that are dried and then they soak them and cook them.
Yes.
So it depends what you're doing. If you're doing the Najafi style, you can get away with the canned chickpeas.
Okay.
If you're doing Karbalai, no, as my mom said, you have to try, you have to use dried. Yes, because they don't mash easily. They're cooked, but they're a whole piece.
Okay.
So here's where you add your chickpeas, whether it's the soaked one or from the can, you add them in, then you add tomato paste. Okay. Now the trick is you add the dried lemon at the very end because it can add a bitter taste. So leave it at the very, very end. Cook all of this together. Later on Instagram, if you go to my Instagram, you'll find the step-by-step there on my stories, is you put them all together and let them stew together and simmer. So when you see those big pots, they cook for hours, it's because mashallah, there's so much of them. Yes. But when you have the meat cooked ahead of time and the chickpeas soft, it cooks faster. And so you add salt and the dried lemon black, according to taste. Key thing, make sure you have your cardamom in there. And of course you cook your rice white, and then you add the bit of saffron on there as well. We cook our rice with, my mom especially, with cardamom. She'll put a few pods in there in the rice for that beautiful fragrance. And of course, that's it. You garnish it, and then you have, like the najafi, here's the distinction. Najafi is mashed like this. So I actually took a potato masher and mashed it all together. So the najafi style is quite thick. And you see that the meat here, you can see here the meat, it's shredded.
Right.
It's like cold meat with the chickpeas. And it's a thicker, and when it dries, it becomes thick, kind of like the Allah afikum, like the halim, right? The Karbalai is different. It's more of a soup, a stew soup, not like this, because it's not mashed up. Najafi is mashed, Karbalai is whole pieces with the chickpeas. And so it's because you're using those dried ones. They don't mash up, but they have to cook right.
Inshallah, next trip I'll have to keep an eye out for which one is Najafi and which one is Karbala.
You'll
Make
know.
sure
You'll
that
know
I get
even.
the taste of both of them. I love their food.
Oh,
Well,
bless you, Auntie.
well, you know what? I have a confession. I've had their tea and had their coffee and everything along the way, so I don't stop myself. But
Alhamdulillah.
anyways,
You know, there is the belief of that you know, if it's this is the food of al Imam that has barakah, and absolutely, but at the same time, you have to exercise caution as
yes,
well.
of course,
You have
of
to
course,
do that.
definitely.
I remember when I was with the brother, when we got to the brother here for this book. By the way, I highly recommend, for those of you, especially who are not going this year, order this book.
Okay.
You will relive some exquisite memories. I know you have your own, but it's so differently done when you have a professional photographer who captures these incredible images and that you can associate. It's written with beautiful poetry as well. So I highly recommend that. Now I have to just show you one of the pictures that if I can find it, that's okay. In terms of, sorry, just a thought slipped my mind and left. Oh, shit. Oh, yes, I remember now. I remember. So we were at one of the mokibs, the brother and I, and we were told from the group that it's safe to eat here. You can eat there. And they had this amazing Iranian type of rice with saffron that I absolutely adore. And they didn't have qeema, they had a different meat stew. And it was just, the fragrance of it was exquisite. And I said, since they said it's safe, okay, I'm going to try my meat, because I don't taste meat until I've been in Iraq until at least a week. All I eat is yogurt, bananas, rice, bread, you know, and like peanut butter if I bring it with me, things like that I know is okay. Anything like extra dairy like gamad and meat, I kind of avoid until I'm a week into it, just for my stomach to get used to it. I was good for those few days until I got to that mokib. And they said it was safe, and I tried it. Sebzi. Yes, sebzi as well. I tried it. I ate it, and he looked at me and he said, I don't think you should have done that. And I said, oh, but it's so good. They said it's clean. Inshallah, nothing. Barakat al-Hussain. Next day, we were walking into Karbala. Okay? We walked in the group into Karbala. At the beginning, they let the women hold the flags. Then they said, culture. The women cannot go in with the flags, as culture respecting the local customs. Give it back to the men. So as we were doing that, all of a sudden my stomach goes,
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Because meat shows up, a day and a half or so, it shows up. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And then he's like, I told you.
Well, okay, I'm going to end on this note right now because we've gone way over our time.
Alhamdulillah.
So, on behalf of the Nudba Chai Chat group, we'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to come and, you know, enlighten us. Beautiful, you know, wish we could spend more time, you know, hear more about it. Inshallah, maybe another time we'll get you back. And thank you for taking the time out.
My
please
pleasure.
Remember us in your duas as well.
Likewise, to everybody, please remember us in your duas.
And remember us when you think of Arbaeen, remember us as well.
All
and
of
hopefully that, you know,
bless you all. Bless you all. Please remember all in your duas. And forgive me if I have made any mistakes or errors or have not covered everything. There's just so much. I spoke about the ones I'm familiar with.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Keep in touch.
Inshallah. Take care, Auntie. Khudafis.
Khudafis.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.